Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josie. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of badassery herself, the real Jen Josie. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josie, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's badassery bestowment, my little badass gift to you. Today's topic is scope of work. For real estate investors, partnering with contractors is a cornerstone for successful property renovations. However, ensuring projects run smoothly and meet expectations requires meticulous planning and communication. One indispensable tool in this process is a detailed scope of work. Here are 6 reasons why it's crucial for real estate investors to use a comprehensive scope of work when collaborating with contractors. Number 1, clarity and expectations. A detailed scope of work provides clarity on project requirements, ensuring everyone involved understands their roles and responsibilities. Number 2, prevention of misunderstandings. By clearly defining project specifications, the scope of work helps prevent misunderstandings and conflicts between investors and contractors. Number 3, accurate budgeting. Detailed project descriptions in the scope of work enable more accurate budgeting and cost estimation, helping investors stay within financial constraints. Number 4, quality assurance. Specification of quality standards and materials make certain that the final outcome meets the investor's expectations for craftsmanship and durability. Number 5, this one's a biggie, legal protection. A well-documented scope of work can serve as legal protection in case of disputes, providing a clear reference point for resolving conflicts. Number 6, efficient project management. With a detailed roadmap outlined in the scope of work, project management becomes more efficient, leading to timely completion and improved return on investment. So, by leveraging this tool, real estate investors can streamline operations, minimize misunderstandings, and ultimately achieve successful project outcomes. Now, on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. We have with us Clint Harris. Clint is a professional real estate investor, entrepreneur, and handles capital raising and investor relations at Nomad Capital. He owns Going Coastal Property Management and hosts the Truly Passive Income podcast. With a background in medical sales, Clint built a lucrative multifamily real estate portfolio converted to high-performing Airbnb properties. Frustrated with management services, he founded Going Coastal Property Management. For diversification, Clint transitioned to self-storage investments, eventually joining Nomad Capital as a general partner, buying old big box retail buildings and converting them to self-storage. Having raised capital for over $100 million in stabilized assets, his mission is to inspire financial, location, and time independence for investors. It's my pleasure to have him on the show, so welcome, Clint Harris.
Thank you so much. It is great to be here. That is quite the intro. That was amazing.
The crowd goes wild.
It's the first time I've done this in front of a live audience this big. I don't know how you booked a stadium. That's incredible.
I'm so happy to have you on here, and we are semi-neighbors. You are in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm in Raleigh, and I'm sure our paths will cross soon, having now become Facebook friends, but I am thrilled to have you on here. Give us a background of how you got involved in real estate.
Sure. So I'm Clint Harris out of Wilmington, North Carolina, originally from South Carolina. And I had a 16-year career selling and implanting pacemakers and defibrillators. So I worked in cardiology and medical sales. And that's kind of a young man's game. Along with that, it's, heart problems are not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's around the clock. And so it comes with a lot of running from one hospital to another for procedures, on call, late nights, driving, 3-4 hours in any direction to emergency rooms. It kind of grinds you down over time. I knew that. I loved it. I was lucky enough to be pretty good at it with an incredible team. But knowing that it can really wear on you, I needed to create an off-ramp from that lifestyle at some point, right? Just knowing that it was a young man's game. And so I chose real estate as a vehicle of how to do that. My first house was a house hack. I didn't know that's what it was called at the time, but I bought a duplex, lived in one half, rented out the other to a friend. So I lived for free, thought I was a genius. I was not. And then my girlfriend at the time, later fiance, and now my wife did the same thing in the same neighborhood. And so that kind of was our start. And I think if you get the vision early on in your early mid-20s of never paying a mortgage, you never want to go back to that. It changes. It's a mindset shift, right? So this is kind of post 2008 crash. So 2010, 2013 timeframe, we bought 9 single family properties during that timeframe. Figured out the hard way and over a long period of time that it's a very slow way to get ahead. It does not scale very well. And so eventually, fast forward, I took a promotion and took over the medical sales territory in Wilmington, North Carolina in 2017. That led me to an area that had the opportunity to do short-term rentals. So we kind of repeated our first lesson. We bought a duplex at the beach, 2 blocks off the water, renovated. One half was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath that we lived in. The other half was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath that we Airbnb'd, and it paid for the entire property. And we netted about $14,000 a year on top of that. And so again, it was like, this is amazing. We need to keep doing this. So we were buying small multifamily properties, converting them to short-term rentals, got to 14, and we realized that we had made a mistake. I talk about, everybody talks about the importance of financial independence or financial freedom. It's a buzzword, right? It's a marketing term, and it's all over. What I learned is when I replaced my income from medical sales, still doing that, just doing rentals on the side, is that we did it all wrong. Because even though we achieved a level of financial freedom, what we definitely did not accomplish was freedom of location or freedom of time, because we still had, instead of 1 tenant per unit, we have 8 to 10 tenants per unit every month. Busy during the summer, especially on the weekends. Even when I wasn't on call with work, I was on call with that. And I realized that I couldn't find a property management company that could get the same numbers out of the properties that we did. Ultimately, I think most people will come to realize over time that nobody minds your business the way that you mind your business. And that led into building a property management company, which was a 2-year journey in and of itself. We still own that company with partners. It manages our 14 listings plus another 80. And that was the trigger point for me that started the aggressive pursuit of all investment strategies that are truly passive.
I was going to say, because you co-host the Truly Passive Income podcast, and there's nothing passive about short-term rentals. So it is a lot of work, a lot of hustle, but it's really, really good money. And going from, having all these properties, I'm just curious because I love short-term rentals. What do you love the most about short-term rentals?
So specific short-term rentals at the time with a low interest rate the forced appreciation was incredible, because you could get a property. Specifically in my market, my focus was on a multifamily property. Like if I bought 4 condos that had 4 mortgages, 4 HOAs, 4 sets of taxes and utilities, they would break even. But I have 3 quadplexes right now. And with one quadplex, it's one set of fixed overhead, but you can net $80,000 to $90,000 a year net to owner off of that. So the economies of scale, but specifically, like, I would buy those properties with a bad long-term tenant in place. And when you move out that tenant at the end of their lease and you renovate the property and you convert it to an Airbnb, it 3.5 to 4x's the gross potential rental income. It's a massive swing, right? It's an asset class conversion. You're buying it as one thing, and then you convert it. If you understand the data that goes with short-term rentals, and if it's in a good area, you can have a massive swing. And especially on a multifamily property, it can be a giant swing in your favor, not only in terms of cash flow, but also in terms of value it adds into the property that you can recapitalize through a refinance or something like that. So that asset class conversion is anytime you change from one thing to another. And in this case, I think the opportunity for a lot of people out there is if you have a rental, you can run the numbers and look at it and find out what's it worth as a short-term rental. You might find out that some of the properties you're already sitting on could have a swing of $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 net to owner difference with a different strategy. So I think it's another tool that you have in your tool belt is, short-term rentals, mid-term rentals, long-term rentals, having the vision to look at your options and look at your market and find out what the consumers are looking for. That's the most important thing is adaptability.
Clint, I think that's huge. And what I also like, because we had a quad in downtown Raleigh that we did the short-term rental, but we have a rule where you can only do two. If you have four, you can only do half as short-term. And so we had to do mid-term as well, which worked out perfectly fine. But what I also liked about it was your cleaning team's going to one location and there's efficiency there of getting it turned over quicker, et cetera. So on the flip side of this, what do you least like about short-term rentals?
I really loved it at first, and frankly, I still do. There's a lot of it that I really enjoy. What changed for me is that I don't think that much change in the Airbnb space, like from the macro. There's a ton of changes from year over year and COVID and everything like that. What changed for me is that I had kids, and now I've got a 4-year-old son and I've got a 1-year-old son, and my time is more important to me. And so it was a wildly active investment strategy. So originally I was going to, we'll just give them to property management, which didn't work. So we had to spend 2 years building out a property management company. And so if you look at us now, it looks wildly passive. It's not. I would say it's residual. We front loaded 2 years of work to build up a management system that can manage those. So I love a lot of the things about short-term rentals, except for the time commitment and the expectation that somebody else is going to be able to run it as good as you can. Oof. Because, the next step from me, originally I thought that single family homes was a destination for us. And I sounded like every young investor, like I'm going to get 10, then I can buy 2 more a year. And then in, this many years, I've got 20, and then I'm going to get 40, and then we're going to retire and be done. And the reality is if one is 1 to 2 headaches a year, then how many headaches is 10? Right. And it doesn't scale linearly, right? You have additional layers of responsibility. Same thing with short-term rentals. I moved on and I thought that multifamily short-term rentals were a destination for us. Even though it came with a level of financial freedom, what it didn't come with was time and location independence. And what I'm looking for my life and the amount of time I get to spend with my wife and with my children is independence of purpose, where you go where you want, when you want, and do what you want. Mm-hmm. That means you have to choose the right asset class that is either not as laborious as a short-term rental is, or that you can put management in place. And then it has to have the economies of scale to get you to what your goal is so you can work backwards from that, not just with finances in mind, but also the time and the location independence so that you can create that independence of purpose in your life to pursue whatever you think is important.
Huge. And I love that you're talking about, as a destination, and that's fantastic. I can remember some of my friends, 2018, 2019 went full force into short-term rentals, and it became a very saturated market. That is an overused term in the Airbnb, world is saturation. But once COVID hit, a lot of them, because they put all their eggs in one basket, just struggled. They were losing thousands and thousands of dollars per month because some areas short-term rentals shut down completely. And then now there's new regulations for certain things, et cetera. So one of the bullet points that you have in your pre-questionnaire here is you talk about diversification. So what was your first step into diversifying from this? Because the listeners out there, maybe someone has a short-term rental and, that's what their focus is right now. But what would be a good next step after, say, short-term rentals?
This is a great question. So the reason that, diversification for us means a lot different now than it did 5-6 years ago. We bought our first short-term rental in 2018, back before it was cool in our market. At the time, there was 1,128 active listings. The next year there was 1,250, then 1,550, then 1,750, and last year there was 2,300. So what you can't control, and I'm on an island, right? There's only so much space, but what you can't control is the supply in your market. The people, we did shut down through COVID, but when we opened back up, people had been cooped up and we exploded. We did really, really well the next few years. And because of that, more people rushed into the market. And the people that did it a long time that had good reviews have still done very, very well. But it's not a market to dip your toe into now. It's very tough, especially with the interest rates where they are right now. So you keep in mind, like we went all in on short-term rentals, but I knew that we couldn't do it forever. Not because I was smart enough to predict the market or know anything else that was going to happen. It's because we live at the beach. And at one point we got hit with 3 hurricanes in 2 years. And it's kind of a matter of time until you have issues. I was willing to go all in on that strategy because it was generating so much cash flow that I was going to be able to turn around and invest that into other asset classes, other places. So once I got to the point where I was still implanting pacemakers, but we had a strong third income for our household outside of my wife being a realtor, that we were able to just take that money and put it to work so that money was getting up every day and going to work even when we didn't feel like it, right? And that was when I got to the point of, okay, we've pushed this for a few years. We've got strong cash flow. It's time to diversify. And in diversification, it's going to look a little bit different for everyone. My diversification strategy, and it's pretty common to say different asset classes, different geography, and different operators. Specifically, I look now to invest into passive investment strategies using syndication, but I'm looking for different assets, different markets, different geography, different operators. I'm also looking for different time structures that are paying out different amounts at different time. And especially right now, you better look for, I think I mentioned debt structure. You better focus on that because, I talk to investors all the time now. And I talked to somebody recently who was invested into 7 different offerings by different operators in different geography, multifamily homes, apartment complexes, mobile home parks, a winery, ATMs, a few other things, but they all had problems at the same time and his entire portfolio took a hit. Oof. 5 operators stopped distributions. 1 stopped distributions and did a capital call, and 1 stopped distributions, then did a capital call, and now it's going down and it's a total loss. Because even though they were diversified in different assets, different geography, and different operators, they all had the same variable rate debt structure underlying. And so when interest rates shot up faster than they ever have in the history of the country, their entire portfolio was exposed. So if you're an operator, I would suggest diversify into what you care about. You want to do short-term rentals? Great. Do some at the beach, do some in the mountains, enjoy them when you're not renting them out. Factor in the cost of management up front. If you're managing it, if it's only a good deal if you manage it, what happens if 2 to 3 years in, you figure out that you hate managing it? And now you can't afford to pay for management, or it turns what was a good deal into a bad deal. And you're just hoping that it's appreciated enough that you have an exit strategy. So that's why I like the asset class conversion. I still like short-term rentals because I have a company that can manage that for me. But get out of your geography, look at different areas. But more importantly, the number one thing is to figure out what your goal is for your family and work backwards from there. And just be aware that whatever you're doing along the way, I encourage people to always be a student of the game, always listen to podcasts, always read books and network, because who you are right now is who you're going to be 10 years from now, with the exception of the places you go, the people you meet, and the content that you consume. And the reality is, even if what you do next is not the destination and you're going to move on to something else, the lessons you learn now from flipping single family homes or Airbnbs or whatever, it's going to translate to no matter the size of the next thing that you go after.
Clint, I love everything you just said. Thank you for saying all that. And back to my question though, what is the other direction that you went from short-term rentals? What was the first, avenue that you started heading down there?
I am notoriously long-winded, so I'll tell you that now. So
I love it.
That's the explanation of my journey, but here was the actual journey. I didn't have a destination in mind. I had a financial goal and what my time and location independence needed to look like, but I didn't know how to get there. So the first thing I did was identify people that looked like they had the destination that I was looking for. So specifically within the people that I knew and with our investor community, I was looking at the old guys, right? And women too, right? But the older people that have the time to do what they want with their kids, to travel, to take a couple months to go here or there, the people that are doing all the things, right? not the people that are flashy and have so much, but are living, the quality of life that they want and have the freedom to go where they want. And those are the people that I went and I interviewed and I talked to and I asked them what it was. And so when you poll that audience and you take away the business that they sold and you take away anything that they inherited from their family, what was it from an investment strategy that they did on the side that I could do on the side? In my community, it was one of three things. It was mobile home parks, which I was already burned out on tenants and wasn't interested in that. It was hard money lending, like lending money to house flippers. And I didn't have the 7 figures it took to get started with that. Or it was self-storage. And self-storage, I was like, okay, this is the exact opposite of Airbnbs. Instead of having 8 to 10 tenants in a month, paying a lot of money and having really high expectations, you're renting someone a box of air. What they do with it is up to them, right? But it's 600 units, that no one's living there. You technically have tenants, but it's completely different. And so that started my pursuit of self-storage. And that also opened up the door to the possibility of syndication because I needed a tool that created economies of scale to get there. I could save and save and save and maybe buy one small self-storage facility, but I was looking for economies of scale. I'd rather be a smaller piece of a bigger picture to help me accomplish my goals faster.
Huge. And in the introduction, it was mentioned that you are buying these old big box retail buildings and converting them into self-storage, which is, by the way, genius. And I saw a before and after photo of one. It looked like an old K-Mart or something. I don't know what building it was, but structurally, like, what are you putting in there? Just on the flip side of it, are you the partitions, all that fun stuff? How does all that work?
Yeah. So we're buying a giant cinder block shell, right? We buy big box retail buildings, K-Marts, grocery stores, warehouses, and textile mills. They're all over the Southeast. And we can buy these buildings for pennies on the dollar compared to the replacement cost rather than building from the ground up. It's basically a cinder block shell. Sometimes they've already been renovated to some level, but if not, we're changing the electrical out to LED. And then we're usually replacing the AC units because a lot of times these buildings have been empty for 8, 10, 12 years. We're fixing any structural issues with the roof or anything like that. But besides that, we just fill the whole thing with metal storage units, just like you would see in just metal walls, partitions, wire mesh across the top and roll up doors. So we took our first building that we did together as a joint venture. We bought an old K-Mart building in Reidsville, North Carolina, for $1.5 million. It's 87,000 square feet. Whew. If we just wanted to build that cinder block shell, the insurance company said, it was going to cost $6.5 million just to build the shell.
Wow.
So it's kind of like if you flip a house, you don't make your money when you sell the house. You don't make your money when you renovated it. You made your money when it smelled like dogs and cats and you bought it for dirt cheap. So we bought that for $1.5 million because it would have cost us more, 4 times that amount to build that shell. So, but if you think about it from a residential density, like that community used to drive to that building to buy their home goods. And even though Amazon and Walmart have decimated that space, the same people still live in the community. It's got great visibility and traffic count. And the same reason those people used to go there to buy their home goods is the same reason that those same people will drive back to the same building and pay us to put the same stuff right back inside of it. It's just the inverse flow, right? So the difference is if you and I, Jen, wanted to go build a self-storage facility right now, it's going to cost us $120 a square foot for the construction, plus the cost of the land underneath. We can buy these buildings for dirt cheap because nobody wants an 87,000 square foot Kmart. It's been sitting empty for a decade. We buy it for pennies on the dollar. My partners are the GCs. I partner with some local investors that I met through short-term rentals. And we pour money into it. We do the renovation. That one, we bought it for 1.5. We put 2.5 million into it that we raised from a small group of investors. And when we're done with the building, it was worth 9.1. And then you fill it up, right? And you just turn it into 700 units, and people go straight back to the same building. You have a QR code on the door and touchscreen kiosk. We have someone in the office. That's great, right? That's a cool concept, but that's not really the sexy part. That's not the badassery, if you will. So here's the tricky part. $120 a square to build a new one, and it's going to take you 3 to 4 years to go through the land entitlement process. From the time we buy a building to the time we open the doors, we're average 12 months. And for the cost of the building, the land, the conversion, the parking lot, all of it, across the portfolio of 2 K-Marts, 3 warehouses, a grocery store, 2 textile mills, and a Sundrop bottling facility that we have converted, our average is $65 a square foot for the building, the construction, everything. Which means when we fill the building up and we stabilize it, we're usually sitting around 35% loan to value. So at that point, we don't have to sell it for everybody to get a payday. We can refinance to 55, maybe 60% loan to value. We can pull out enough money to double all of the investors' money. When we double their capital by way of a refinance, we didn't sell anything. It's not a capital gain. That's non-taxable income. So we can double our investors' money, pull a couple million out for Nomad, keep the asset. Everybody stays in. We hold it long-term and everybody continues to get cash flow. So currently, I got to update the stats on my intro sheet. We're currently sitting at $150 million in assets under management. Started in 2021 with syndication, and we just had one letter of intent accepted last week, and just found out we had another one accepted this week. We've got a 3-year goal. We're 3 years in, 5-year goal of $500 million, 10-year goal of $1 billion, and again at $150 million right now, we haven't sold anything.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you mentioned a couple times in there, Nomad Capital. So tell us about this company and your involvement with it.
So I'm a general partner with Nomad. My partners, Eric and Levi Hemingway, they're a father and son team. Together have 30 years of commercial construction experience. I met them in Carolina Beach, the market where I was. I was doing short-term rentals. They bought an oceanfront hotel and were renovating it and asked me to come in as a consultant to help with the management on that hotel after a little bit of a rocky start. And by then I had met them, spent about 1.5 years getting to know them through the different local real estate meetups and having beers together and just chatting. And so I helped them with consultation on their hotel. And through that, they tried to hire me for that. And I was like, nope, but here's what I will do. I'll bring my management team, help any way that I can, because I know you well enough to know you're going to go back into storage. That's the direction I want to go, specifically into syndication. So I'll help you any way I can. When you get back into storage, please let me know. I want to raise capital. And they did. 1 year later, they called me and I grouped together some of my cardiology buddies that I was still working with at the hospital. We put the capital in. They did the construction. We built it out, did another project after that, another one after that. And then in November of 2022, I left medical sales behind for good. General partner with Nomad Capital, and we're rolling.
So to be truly passive, because this has been a hot topic in a couple of my most recent guests, you, instead of going to full-time management of these short-term rentals, you created a management company. Now that kind of runs itself, correct?
Correct.
And then how is being a lender in Nomad Capital and also in the storage, how is that completely passive?
It is not, but there's irony here. I say this as the host of the Truly Passive Income podcast. There is nothing that is truly passive. I say that, so it's a little tongue in cheek, but I will say this, everything I did in the past was very active, building up to the point of it being passive. I started the podcast in the aggressive pursuit of talking to the smartest people I could every year and getting them to sit down and give me 45 minutes to an hour of their condensed life experience. And here's what I've come to learn. The most passive investment strategy is either investing in a business that a friend or a family member runs and you don't have to do anything but put your capital in and it's with a person you trust, or typically it's in syndication. Syndication is where ultimately I think most people know you have to have 3 things to have success in real estate investing. It's time, experience, and money. A lot of people out there have money, but they don't have time. And without time, you can't get experience. Or there are people out there that have time and can get experience, but they don't have the money, right? And the idea with syndication is, especially for people that have a good high earning income, but they're busy and they don't have time.
Right.
It's not smart for them to stop being an ER doctor or a small business owner or an IT person and go spend their time managing single family rentals, right? You can hire somebody else to do that for a lot cheaper than what your hourly wage should be. The idea is the people that have money can take that and partner with other people that have time and experience. And together, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We pool money together from a group of investors to go buy these big properties. Right now, we're buying 5 of them at a time and converting them to self-storage. So they put their capital in. Their work is vetting the sponsors up front, right? Your job, if you're just a passive investor, it might take you hours, it might take you days, could take you weeks. You've got to do your due diligence, trust who you're partnering with, understand the business model, read the legal documents and everything else. But just like I did with the property management company, you're front loading that work.
Right.
Once you pick an operator and you're like, this is who I'm partnered with, obviously keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on. You should be getting monthly communications and things like that. But after that, it's completely passive. And your job is, to keep track of what your return is and read your communications. I had an investor recently to tell me like this. He's like, okay, I would make an investment and I look on what's my cash on cash return. He goes, well, then, I got to the point of, look, what's my total return on investment? But then as my investments grow in value, say I'm making $50,000 a year on a $500,000 investment. Well, that's 10%. What happens when the value of that asset goes up to $1 million? You're still making $50,000 a year, but now it's worth $1 million. That's a 5% return on equity. So you have to stop thinking about what's my return on investment and start thinking about what's my return on equity. And if it drops below what you can get someplace else, it's probably time to reposition that equity. I'm doing that right now with one of my properties. But the next step after that he coached me on, very successful older guy, he goes, eventually you need to start looking at what's my return on time.
Oof.
And I would rather take a smaller return on investment or return on equity. Instead of 35%, maybe it's 20%. But what if I'm thinking about that for 1 hour per quarter when I'm looking at the financial statement and I'm reading the quarterly summary, even skipping the monthly updates? He goes, that's 1 hour a quarter. That's a fantastic return on time. If I'm making 20% on my money, but it takes me 1 hour a quarter, that's 4 hours a year. From a return on time standpoint, you can't beat that. And what we all find is as we get older, and our relationships grow, and hopefully our time with our family and our support system grows, time becomes worth more than anything else. And if you outgrow the cash on cash return, because originally I'm trying to replace my cash as soon as possible, then return on investment. Eventually, as your portfolio grows, return on equity. At some point, we will all get to the point where we look at what's our return on time. And when we're all 95 years old, we're going to probably be very careful about the way that we spend our time because that time is precious. And I think that the sooner people think about that and realize that, and we can reposition equity in a way that gives you the greatest return on time after your basic needs are met, that is what is going to give you more years and decades of your life with a freedom of purpose to decide how that time needs to be spent for you.
So good. Oh my goodness. And something you said at the start of that, you said you are a podcaster because you get to spend an hour with some of the smartest people out there. And I am feeling that right now interviewing you. So Clint, thank you for that. And listeners, if you are out there and that sounds good, you want to definitely check out nomadcapital.us and park your money somewhere. It's in great hands. And I love all that you said there, but you were mentioning time and family. And we had a quick little conversation before we hit record here. And you were talking about your sons and what did you do? Because I'm a former school teacher. So I don't like things just handed to the children, the adults of tomorrow, shall we say. So what are you doing now for your 2 boys in the future?
I'm not telling them that I'm doing anything, first of all, but I'm one of 6 children. I grew up in a lower middle class family, and I just kind of knew that if I needed anything in life, I was going to have to get it myself. And I think that motivation is important, and you can either choose to be complacent with what you have, and if you're happy there, that's great. Don't change anything, because the pursuit of things is certainly not that important. I've always said, I don't want to die with a bunch of stuff. I'd love to die with a giant stack of pictures of cool things I did with beautiful people that I love in beautiful places. And I hope that they have the same mentality, but they need to think that anything coming to them, they're going to have to get it themselves. I think the ability to save our way to retirement for most of my generation is gone. I think my parents could and my grandparents could. But for most of my generation, the ability to save your way there has been taken away, which means the ability to save for your children in a meaningful way has likely been taken away. So what we did is we took one of our quadplex Airbnb properties and we accelerated. I bought the property the month that my first son was born. He's 4 years old. And we set, it's on a 30-year note, but we set the payments to pay off. Originally, I had it set when he was 18, and then I later realized that was too late. So I changed it. So that property is set so that it's going to pay off when he turns 16. So he's 4 years old now. I've got a 1-year-old. I positioned into a property that right now it's worth about $700,000. It's a quadplex at the beach. It's probably worth a lot more than that, but it is in a little bit rough shape. We're going through the process right now to raise the property, do a full renovation. But there's $200,000 federal grant going into the property. So it's going to make it a lot nicer because it's in a bad flood zone. But that's going to reposition that property with the idea of, okay, so what's it worth when he's 16? Maybe, $1 million. Okay. So if I refi to 60% LTV or 70%, call it 60%. I don't want to stress the asset. I want it to continue to cash flow as a quadplex Airbnb. It'll still cash flow. And that's $600,000 tax-free that I never paid $1 towards for whatever comes next for them, right? Could be college. I think the value of college is going down over time. But if they decide that they want to do college and have that experience, that's great. If they want to go into the medical field, that can help with medical school. If they decide they want to start a business or start in real estate, that would be great too. Whatever it is, they're going to have to present their goals to me and what they want to accomplish and put it together in a way that makes sense. And we're going to structure something together where they have skin in the game and have to make sure it works. And right now, I've got a 4-year-old. Our rule, my wife and I's rule, is that when they turn 5, they have to have a business every summer. And I don't care if it's successful or not. The reality is we started early because we have a friend has a farm that lets us keep some beehives out there. So we harvested 35 pounds of honey earlier this year. My son his name is Fisher, and he created Fisher's Happy Bee Company and made labels and put bottles together. And he went out and sold honey, sold out in an hour and a half and made almost $490, I think.
Nice.
And then that money is being reinvested into another business that he started. Again, I don't care if it's successful. It's not about the money, but 10% is for church, 10% is for saving. The rest of it he can spend it if he wants. But we're trying to instill the idea of reinvesting it into something else, because ultimately, like, the idea is getting away from trading your time for money. If you're trading your time for money, then you're trading away something that is extremely valuable to pay for somebody else's days off. Like, what are we doing here? This is the greatest time to be alive that we've ever had in terms of opportunity. Like, 30 years ago, you and I never would have met. And now we're sitting here talking, having
Right.
this conversation, being able to record it and share it out with other people. That's amazing. And I appreciate what you said about, the knowledge that I'm bringing. Keep in mind, it's not my knowledge. Like, it's what I've amassed from other people because we have a better way to connect than ever before. My fear is that children born into that are going to take it for granted. And I want to instill in them the knowledge to know how to create value out of thin air yourself so that you don't have to trade the best years of your life away to somebody else. And if you are doing that and you love it, that's great. Just the same way that I built an off-ramp for myself with a very laborious process, and it took me years and years through single families and multifamily and Airbnb. You can do that ahead of time by partnering with the right people and putting that capital to work, and eventually get to the point where we're not trading time for money.
Well, before we move to the second part of the podcast here, I just have to commend you because I see posts all the time about, they should be teaching this in schools. They should be teaching this, et cetera. And it infuriates me at times because I am a former school teacher of 16 years. And I just really have to commend you for what you are teaching your boys at home, because, we can't teach that necessarily in schools, and you're making them have their business each summer. I think that is just lovely. So thank you for sharing that. And we are going to move to the second part of the podcast here, which is what makes Clint Harris a badass, which clearly you are. And we're going to use the acronym BADASS, and the first letter is B for book. What is a book that's made a huge difference in your life?
The one that comes straight to mind for me, as I was building out a property management company is Who Not How, Dan
Mhm.
Sullivan. I recommend that book all the time. And I run into these situations all the time, especially if you're growing a small business. You run into the scenario where you're, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And that book trained me that that's not the question. The question is not, how do I do this list of 50 things? It's, who do I know that would be better at these things than I am? Or who do I know that has done this before? Right. And the who not how situation is the reason I went and found the older successful people that did self-storage that pointed me at that direction. It would have taken me years to build my own journey to get there. The idea of starting with a destination and working backwards by going to people that are better at doing it than you are, I think is really powerful. So that Who Not How, Dan Sullivan, and then within Nomad and building out the structure of the team, we have 4 general partners and then 16 employees right now. Traction. Traction is a really good book in terms of systems and building things out to create the economies of scale. That's a strong recommendation as well.
Agreed. That's Gino Wickman for Traction. That's an excellent book. Thank you. All right. The first A in Badass is for advice. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think, again, the direction to look at the destination and work backwards. And to not get blinded, thinking bigger and surrounding yourself with thinking bigger, right? Like you're a culmination of the advice that you get and the people you surround yourself with. You know, you often hear people say your network is your net worth, and that you're usually the average of the 10 people that you hang out with. And that's true, but also just putting yourself in a situation to be a conduit for knowledge. Like that's again, why I do a podcast. It's not because there's anything special about what we've accomplished, but if you put yourself in a situation where you can not only think about your destination and work backwards from there, but you can hear a lot of other people and what their destination is and how they went about the process of working backwards as well for that. It's just to think bigger, right? And my partner, Eric Hemingway, has a saying that risk is a muscle. And within that, risk is something that, like, the more you work that muscle, it's very painful at first. But the more you work that muscle, the stronger it gets. And if you're willing to take on risks bigger than what other people are willing to take on, you're likely going to get better rewards. Along with that, you need to surround yourself with a network of people that are going to keep you in check and make sure you're not overextending your ability.
Oh, I love it. Very, very well said. All right. The D in Badass is for drive. What drives Clint to be successful?
I'm a naturally competitive person, but I'm also very team oriented. So I like seeing everyone do better as a whole. I'm an 11 on the extrovert scale. And so I like connecting with people. I like feeling like I'm helping. My natural personality is a motivator. And so there's a natural drive that's there. On top of that, like I said, I come from a background where there is no inheritance. There's not going to be anything there besides, character and the relationships that my family has given me. And I'm extremely grateful for that. But outside of that, like, it's just, I know that I have to go get it. And so I want to have the ability to explore a beautiful planet. The fear is living in where, we live on an island. We're not, we don't live luxuriously or anything like that, but where we do live is a very soft landing compared to where I grew up. So the fear is, I don't want to raise a couple little jerks, right? Like, I want my kids to be good people. So I think it's important for us to have the drive to do well for our family, but also spend time not just going to nice places, but try to have exposure to the world and other cultures and different areas where we can help other people to try to build empathy. Because I think that there's a potential risk of too much drive can put you in a situation where that's all you think about. And you need to have, especially for younger boys like I've got, they need to have greater world exposure.
And we do not need any more jerks out there. So
there's enough as there is. That's right. I'm one myself sometimes. I'm not saying I'm not.
My head has spun around a few times myself. So, all right. The second A in Badass is for aspiration. I'm a big goal setter. So what is a goal you are currently working on?
We have financial goals in-house that are not, everybody, if you don't have a number, you should have a number, not because that number is independently important. It's just it's just a number, and inflation can change that number one way or the other. But what it should represent is your independence of purpose. So For me, it means travel. I've never had more fun ever than what I'm doing now. And I love my previous career, but for us, it means, a lot of travel and exposure to different cultures. And like, that's what we aspire to within Nomad. We have goals of growing to $1 billion in assets under management, not because that number is that important, but it represents a tribe of real estate nomads. And we think that there's a better way. And we don't think that the hustle culture, like we are hustling, don't get me wrong, but what are we hustling for? Right? Like what's the reason? We should be hustling now, and delayed gratification is great, but we should be working towards a place where we can take, weeks or months or a year or two off to do things that are important to us that are bucket list items. One of the last things my granddad told me past years ago was I told him I want to do this and I want to do that. I just got back from Australia and I'm a big spearfisher and diver and I want to go these places. And he just said, do it while you're young. You know what I mean? I think living, in the present and giving with a warm hand where you can do the right thing for your family and people around you while you're still alive and young enough to enjoy it is important. And so we have financial goals because that's a reflection on time, location, and financial independence. And that independence of purpose is going to look different for everyone.
Well, thank you, Granddad, for that, because it is important to do it while you are young. And I am getting up there in age and can feel the creak and crack in my bones, etc. So yes, that is huge. All right. The first S in Badass is for systems. What systems do you have in place to help you achieve success?
The number one system that works for me is by being surrounded by people that are smarter than I am. I'm not an extremely well organized person. I have all these things in my brain that we need to accomplish, and it's easy to get caught up with flashy item syndrome. And so Traction is a book that really helped us put systems in place. There's also a book called Systemology, and dedicated like meetings, time frame, structure, software. It's not something I'm great at. We just rolled out a nationwide marketing campaign. We just converted from a 506B syndication to 506C. That's not important now, but it allows us to roll out a nationwide marketing campaign. And so in terms of handling leads, I love to connect with investors all day, every day, and talk with people because that's my passion. But I have to handle that in a structured way to make sure that if I tell somebody I'm going to get back with them or communicate with them this time, that's my integrity on the line. I want to make sure I'm keeping my word. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by that as the size of the funnel starts to increase. So those systems are going to look different than anybody. But for us, the framework of what we do came from Traction and Systemology, and then having people that are very detail oriented. One thing that I think is brilliant is the reason I know that I'm a motivator is because, recently took another personality test, which I've done multiple times throughout my career. We've had everybody in the company take them. And then when you sit down and you have a conversation about what people's natural ability is, you want to put them in the right position. So Levi Hemingway, Eric's son, he's our CEO, and he's doing a fantastic job. And he had an acronym the other day, is RPRS, and it's right person, right seat. And we're not just giving people a job. There might be jobs that people are doing right now because we need somebody to fill that role. But ultimately for longevity, and we want everyone to stick around for a very long time, it's got to be the right person in the right seat. That means you need to clearly define the seat and you need to clearly define the person. And a lot of times that comes from doing a personality test and diving into what their motivating factors are. And that is going to make whatever system you put together work so much smoothly when you have, the round peg in the round hole and the square peg in the square hole. And
I think that's huge because those personality tests, and they do change over time. Listeners, what he's saying is outstanding because even just in my own personal business, where my husband and myself, we have taken personality tests, but what it also reveals is maybe something that you didn't know you had inside of you that you can now excel at. So I love, love, love that. All right. To wrap this up, Clint, the final S in Badass is for success. What does success mean to you?
Success means disappearing for a little while and everything keeps rolling and realizing that, I'm not needed, that my job right now is to raise capital and do investor education. But success for me means everything's running the way it's supposed to. I'm a very small piece of a very big machine, and being able to step away and focus on bucket list items and spend meaningful time with the phone off. I think that's if you're asking me for measurable success, yeah, it's probably 8 weeks on a catamaran to Grand Cayman with my boys, or across Europe, or taking a van backpacking trip, things like that, where the focus is on the present, and coming back and knowing that things are going to be in better shape than when I left, and everybody in the company being able to do that. I think that's success.
I agree. And this has just been such a fantastic interview. I truly appreciate you being here. For the listeners, what is the best way for them to find you if they want to learn more about Nomad Capital, about your podcast? How did the listeners find you?
The best way to learn about Nomad is we have nomadcapital.us. We have some video on there in our About section that tells about the story and the journey of how we got to where we are, specifically my partners and the founder's story. Outside of that, again, I'm happy to connect with anyone anytime. Just my job is not to sell what we do to anyone. It's to educate on our strategy. And even if it's not right for you, it's probably something you should know about, because at some point in your life, it's likely that time becomes more important than anything else. So syndication is something you should know about. If you want to talk about that, you can reach me, Clint, at nomadcapital.us. I host the Truly Passive Income podcast. I'm not extremely great at it, but you'll hear me there. But more than that, just reach out through email or through the nomadcapital.us website.
Well, Clint, this has been fantastic. And again, I am truly grateful for you being on today's episode.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And that is all. Thank you for listening. And we will catch you on the next episode. Now go out there and share your badassery. And don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josie by visiting therealjenjosie.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.